And those are the teams, obviously, that you shoot for, that you try to go after to compete for the championship in your league. A few years ago, Millsaps College from Jackson, Mississippi, upset Trinity University, they're out of San Antonio, for the football championship. This has been 3 years ago. It was the first time in 14 years, and anyone other than Trinity had won our conference championship. So, big celebration. Millsaps won the conference, and at the week after the championship game, the Jackson newspaper came out to Millsaps College to interview their coach, Mike Dubose, who you all remember was the Alabama football coach. And they asked Coach Dubose the question. They said, what's the difference between coaching at the University of Alabama and coaching at Millsaps College? And I really loved his answer. He said, at Alabama, all the players think they're going to play in the NFL. He said, at Millsaps, all the players think they're going to own an NFL team. So that's kind of the difference between Division I and Division III, and I really kind of like that. So we're certainly continuing to move forward. Things are going well out at Birmingham-Southern, and I know there's probably several of you that are graduates I don't know, but I do see Anna and Richard. I know Diana Isbell's a member of your club, and Diana played on our women's basketball team. She didn't make it in here today, did she? I didn't see her. So anyway, on to basketball. How many of you filled out a bracket for the tournament? That's illegal. I have to turn you in. No. We just got finished with another exciting basketball season. I see David Knight out here, David is an assistant commissioner of the SEC, and we just got back from Atlanta this past weekend where we were part of the SEC basketball tournament, won by Kentucky, and it's been a great year. It's been a great year in college basketball. There's not one dominant team in college basketball. There's not one dominant team, I don't think, in the SEC. David would probably agree. When we went to Atlanta last week, and I thought there were 5 or 6 teams that could win the tournament. Kentucky played extremely well. They beat Florida handily in the championship game, and they're going to move on in the tournament. But one of the things that's kind of a soapbox thing for me, living here in Birmingham, and I've been here since 1983, except for the 4-year exile into Orlando, it has been the fact that the game of basketball in this area, especially in Alabama and really a little bit throughout the Southeast, really struggles to find its place in the sports landscape, in the newspaper, on the radio shows, on TV. I always laugh. My good friend Jim Dunaway, he and I actually go to the same church, I always laugh because he's heard me talk about the lack of respect that the media gives to the sport of basketball. I feel strongly about it. And it's because football is so dominant in this area, and as it should be. Football is great, and I'm just as big a football fan as anyone. I love college football. I grew up in Baton Rouge going to Tiger Stadium as a kid, so I love it as much as anyone. But there's a time and a place for other sports to kind of be on the front page, if you will. And so I'm always trying to say, why don't we talk a little bit about basketball once basketball season starts? And case in point, last February, Auburn and Alabama played basketball in Tuscaloosa. This is a classic example of what I'm talking about. And it was a great game. Alabama came back and won. There were 15,000 people in Coleman Coliseum. That night, on Jim Dunaway's newscast on CBS 42, the lead story on the sports was that in April, ESPN is going to televise the Alabama A-Day game. That was the lead story on the sports that night. And then, by the way, he got around to the Alabama-Auburn basketball game. David, you know what I'm talking about. And we fight that all the time. So I think once we get, and the key is, the teams in Alabama, Auburn, Alabama, UAB in particular, have to do well. They have to win more. They have to be more successful to get people excited. So, where are we going with the NCAA tournament today? David, you got any scores? Give us some updates. Clemson and West Virginia tied at halftime. Kentucky, any Kentucky fans in here? Uh-oh. You can raise your hand. It's okay. You don't have to be a closet Kentucky fan. You can. There are a lot of obnoxious Kentucky fans here in Birmingham, believe me. But I don't know. I think it's going to be a great tournament. Ohio State's the #1 seed. I like them in their bracket. I like Kansas in their bracket. I think those are the two top teams I noticed were President Obama picked Ohio State and Kansas to make the final, and he picked Kansas to win the national championship. Matter of fact, I think that's the second year in a row that the President Obama has picked Kansas to win the national championship. So I guess the law of averages maybe might be in their favor. I think the other two brackets are a little bit more up for grabs. Certainly, folks like Duke in their bracket. I've picked UConn. I just think a team that has gone through the Big East tournament, 5 wins in 5 days with Kemba Walker, who's arguably one of the top players in the country this year. I think they're on a roll and very, very well coached by Jim Calhoun. I kind of like them in that bracket. And then the other bracket, with Pittsburgh as the number 1 seed, Florida. Weren't you surprised Florida was a 2 seed? I was very surprised that Florida was a 2 seed. I mean, they hadn't been rated in the top 10 all year long, and all of a sudden they're in the top 8 in the picks by the NCAA. The 3 seed in that region is BYU without their big guy who got suspended for an honor code violation. And how about that, huh? I know y'all have all heard about that, an honor code violation, and he can't play basketball. Regardless of how you feel about it, you have to kind of applaud the school for standing by their standards. But the 4 seed in that region is Wisconsin, and I'm going to pick UCLA, the 7 seed out of that region. So if you have a bracket and you hadn't filled it out yet, you know for sure that UCLA has no chance since I picked them. All right. With that, I could keep rambling on and on. I don't know really what you want to hear about or talk about. I want to say to all of you just how thrilled we are, and I say we, the older generation in this community who cares about the community and wants to see it continue to move forward and wants to see people get involved in the community and help others in any way they can. You all are the future of the community, and you represent the best and the brightest of what this community is all about. So again, congratulations on what you're doing with Rotaract. I just think it's fantastic. Anytime we in Kiwanis can help you all in any way, we're more than happy to do it. I know we had a social function, didn't we, about a year ago, I think, at the B&A warehouse. We had Paul Feinbaum come. We could do something like that again. We'd love to do that. I thought that was a lot of fun that night. So, all right, with that, I'll shut up, and we've got some time. It's 12:45. Ask some questions, answer some questions, or ask some questions. Well, I think that's probably going to be an isolated case. I know that the junior college system in Alabama has struggled financially for quite a while, and anytime colleges or universities struggle financially, the first place that they look is athletics. I know that's the way it is at Birmingham-Southern. That's the way it is a lot of places. Bevel State, I don't know how many athletes they have. I know the junior college schools here in Alabama do not have football. I think they play men and women's basketball, probably baseball, softball, and that's probably about it. So I can kind of understand why they would do it. I don't think it'll hurt their institution that much in terms of losing students. Again, you're going to have a number of student athletes that are going to want to play in college that are junior college prospects, and if there's not an opportunity for them in this state, they're going to go somewhere. So that's something we might have to be concerned about here in Alabama, that we might lose some of those students to other junior college programs in other states. Obviously, I'm a big proponent of college athletics. I think it does a lot more for men and women in terms of their maturity, their growth, their ability to learn intangible qualities as an individual that helps them in their professional life. Time management, dedication, teamwork, discipline, work ethic, all of those kinds of things that any of you all who are ever athletes, you know what that's meant to you. And I think it's very meaningful and very important. So I'd hate for us to lose that. We're the only country in the world. We are the only country in the world that sponsors athletics in our higher education institutions, the only one. There must be a reason why we do that. And I think the reason is very clear, because it has value. It has value to the men and to the women that participate. I'm on my soapbox here just a little bit. I apologize for being so long-winded. But we read so much and the focus in the media is mainly on the high-profile football players and the high-profile basketball players. But a young man like this right here, Richard Walsh, who played tennis at Birmingham-Southern, he is part of probably 98% of the student athletes on college campuses across the country that are doing all the right things as a student athlete. Clean cut, good student, going to class, working hard, busting his tail on the tennis court to be the best athlete he can be, and oh, by the way, parlaying all of that into a successful professional career. Bingo. Eric, how are you? Good, good.
What's your take on the NCAA selection committee having no ex-basketball coaches on it?
Well, I think the question that has to be asked, and I think the question is being asked a little bit in the media, and I even raised this a little bit on WJOX last week. The NCAA about 5 years ago bought the NIT from a group of schools in New York City. There were 5 schools in New York City that owned the NIT. And it was the worst run tournament in the history of college athletics. They kept David was smiling. David can't say this because he's a SEC guy, but I can say it. But they kept all the money. You never knew who you were playing from one game to the other. It was just crazy. The NCAA bought the NIT. I'm going to answer your question, by the way. They bought the NIT, and they've made it like the NCAA tournament. They seed 1 through 8 in 4 regions, and you know exactly who you're going to play the next game, and et cetera, et cetera. The higher seeds get to host. Now, it's an outstanding tournament. Who decides who plays in that tournament? C.M. Newton is the chair, former coach at Alabama. All the people on the selection committee of the NIT are all former college coaches, every single one of them. So they spend all year, and they're all retired, so they've got time on their hands. And they spend all year watching the teams, going around and watching them. So at the end of the year, they come together and they decide whoever's left after the NCAA selection who to pick. Why didn't the NCAA do the same thing? That's my question. Why don't they do the same thing? Why don't they hire a C.M. Newton and get... There are a lot of former college coaches out there that are retired, or you could have existing ones if you wanted. Maybe athletic directors that were former coaches. I'll volunteer to be on the committee. Because you get a lot of tickets to the Final Four, David. That's one of the perks. But anyway, I think it's a legitimate question. I really do. And I thought this year's selection was the worst job I've seen in a long time of putting the tournament together. They picked 5 teams, 5 at-large teams this year with 14 losses. 14 losses, 5 of them. VCU, although VCU won last night, so you can say, well, they made their case. But the team they beat, USC, I didn't think had any business of being in the tournament. VCU was picked 4th, or was the 4th place team in the Colonial. They lost to Georgia State, who was 12-19, And, of course, the University of Georgia gets in as a 10 seed and had lost twice to Alabama the last week of the season, and Alabama didn't get in. I didn't understand that one either. Of course, I'm biased for the SEC, obviously. So, good question, though. Yes, sir. I thought it was tremendous. I thought it was a really, really well done documentary. I remember, I'm of age where I remember, and I was actually coaching when those guys came through. I saw them play in high school, Jalen Rose and